Welcome to the Secure CIO, the podcast for technology executives who are tasked with hiring and retaining great cybersecurity leaders. Join best-selling author Claire Pales together with industry thought leaders as they answer your questions about sourcing the right leaders, building cybersecurity teams, candidate selection, salaries, skills, and more.
Hello, I'm Claire Pales and welcome to the Secure CIO podcast. Today's guest is Angela Coble. Ange is an executive leader, board member and internationally published author with experience in healthcare, utilities, finance and agriculture. In 2019, Ange was announced as number 18 in Australia's top 50 CIOs, the second time Ange has been listed in this illustrious group. More than 20 years of leadership experience includes executive positions within healthcare industry in security and technology and the electricity supply industry. Ange has an MBA from USQ and a Bachelor of Business also from USQ. She's a certified information security manager, a graduate of the AICD, and is qualified in information security risk management. Ange is an advocate for advancing leaders, mentoring and coaching talent from around the world, delivering inclusive programs in her role as co-lead of the Women's Leadership and Inclusion for Johnson & Johnson across Australia and Asia, and enjoys sharing her experience in career while balancing a busy life in a family driven by equality. Ange has embarked on a PhD around leadership in tech and the impact of women in tech, and is a regular speaker at events. And with all that on her plate, I feel very fortunate to have grabbed 20 minutes of her time. Ange, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Claire. It's my pleasure. I'm really looking forward to sharing some insights with your listeners.
So talk us through the path you've taken from security leader at the start through to global technology leader.
It's an interesting pathway, that's for sure. But to be honest, I wouldn't have it any other way. I guess it started with my natural curiosity. So I was, funnily enough, in sales and marketing organisation, and I realised that technology was going to be quite a disruptive force, and might give away my years here, but I was born agnostic and I did have to learn digital. So I pursued the path of my own growth and my own learning and decided I should learn tech, and the best way to do it was to be immersive. So Johnson & Johnson was brilliant. They gave me the opportunity to explore that. So I thought, well, if I'm going to explore tech, why not just go really deep into the dark and go security? So I did. Loved every minute of it. I didn't realise actually how much I would enjoy it. And I was working with 35 of the best security professionals across the globe. And I'll say that without boundaries of company because they were amazing. Clearly the organisation was bigger than that, but that was the team I was with. And I looked around and I'm thinking, they've all got engineering degrees, they've all done these amazing security certifications. So I thought, well, if I'm in the team, I may as well go all in. So that's when I decided to pursue CISM, so the Certification in Information Security Management, and then do a component of cyber as well. So I did that. Thankfully passed, because that would have been a bit horrible. And then did that for a couple of years and just could not believe, I was a bit like a fish to water. I just loved every moment of it. And I was always, focused on leadership. All of my undergrad, postgrad, and clearly the PhD is all focused on leadership. And so for me, there was this natural tendency. The practitioner level was something that I would learn as and when required, but the leadership was the skill that I was going to take through everything. And it was that which then led me into becoming literally the CIO for the Australian and New Zealand market, and stepping into that role. Because I think you and I have discussed in the past that for me, it's C, insert whatever O. I think leadership is interoperable. It's more about the people that are around you. It's really being authentic, that servant approach, and just really driving that transformational component.
And so do you think the security background itself has helped shape you in your tech leadership role?
Oh, without a doubt. And I didn't realise how much, to be honest, Claire, when I stepped into the role back in 2014 now. So it's quite a tenure compared to my CV if you were to look at it for that particular role. What it enabled me, especially as organisations are moving swiftly into more digitised landscapes, was I created an agility process for the business that I didn't even realise was going to be there, because most things require a quick assessment. What's the impact? What's the risk to that particular solution? And so when you're presented with something, if you can immediately make a quick assessment on the risk being connected and being more security based, then I was educated in that. I could quickly make the assessment. It didn't circumvent any controls or any methods of doing the appropriate assessment, but I could immediately say, this has got legs, let's go do it. Now let's talk to the security team. Or, listen, this is going to have a few issues with it. Let's just go back, have a conversation, get that tidied up before we present it back again. So it was that agility of assessment which came through quite loud and clear. And then with that then comes clarity for customers as well, because if I know the products and how they connect, when I talk to our customers, and especially CIOs in other organizations or CTOs in other organizations, I know what I'm talking about.
And in that process of, you understanding the business risk and then the procedure of it going through a controls assessment or with the security team, how does the security team interact with you? I mean, are you harder on them because you know what they should know, or do they have a different level of respect for you because you're kind of one of them, or how does that work?
I've always been one for walking in other people's shoes. When I was at Country Energy and I was one of their group managers for business performance, I actually got what was then the white card, which allowed me to go out in the field with my steel cap shoes, and actually spent days with our field teams who were literally pulling poles and slinging conductors. So for me, it was always that approach. So it's no different now. So I have this level of empathy for the security team and the pressure that they're constantly under, and that 24/7 follow the sun requirement. But at the same time, when I come to them with something, they know it's had a level of view across it already that may not necessarily have occurred if, someone wasn't in the role that I'm in with the credentials I have. So you're right, there is a level of respect, but I would like to think it would be there anyway, even if I wasn't credentialed to the point that you build that kind of relationship. However, I can honestly say me being able to speak the same language and having spent 2 years in a global role doing security, it makes it easier on everybody.
You've certainly, throughout your career, built on your knowledge, and now you're at a point where you're an executive and you also have a role in a number of boards and advisory groups. How did those roles outside the organisation and within impact your ability to lead and your building of teams that sit around you?
It's actually the ability to expose them to more than maybe what they would have been before. So I'm a big advocate for delegation, for sponsorship of talent that sits around me. And so when I'm outside representing not only my brand, but J&J's as well, it's about the network that I'm forming and how can that help others to grow and really lean into their leadership as well to really embrace their journey. So I've often found when I've been out, either talking at a seminar, and for the first number of years, I would put my hand up for everything. I wanted to get out there, learn as much as I could, get involved in how these conferences came together, really talk about the topics that I was embracing at the time. And that afforded me a luxury of spending time with people that I may not necessarily would have spent time with. And similarly, it's at that board level. You don't spend every day operationally with these people. So there's a different thought that comes with them. There's a variety of topics that they're focused on. And so I'm often connecting teams around me, and not even necessarily the technology team, anyone in the business, to be honest, with some amazing thought leaders that we may not necessarily have had exposure to if I wasn't putting myself out there in that environment.
When we first met, we were chatting via phone because you spend a lot of your time working remotely from the office, and I do too, and I know it takes a lot of energy and commitment. So when you're building teams, and from your advisory perspective as well, How do you feel remote working works, and how do you replicate those hallway conversations within a team that needs to collaborate?
I suspect, and for all your listeners, you can't underestimate the effort required to make planned spontaneity look like it was spontaneous. So there's a bit of effort that's required, and as there should be, right? We get a balance because we choose to be able to live in an environment which certainly recharges my energies. And for the listeners, I have the luxury of living in the Hunter Valley. And for me, 4 years ago, I realised that my environment was so very important to me being able to give everything that I've got when I turn up for work. And it's not necessarily turning up to a location for work. It's the minute my head turns to whatever it is I'll be doing that day, that for me is where my work is. And I love everything that I do, the teams I have around me. So I find working remotely easy, because even when I was living in Sydney, where my head office is, I still would work remotely. I would do 1 or 2 days from home then. And I created a nice little space for myself. My children have grown up with me working that way, so they're used to, notes on the door, do not disturb, recording in process kind of scenario. So there's this learned capability from everyone around me about what it means when I'm at home, and they know the rules and the requirements around it, but so do I. As I've gone through, and especially in that global security role, I was working odd hours. I'd often do the newsreader cast where the top of me was dressed and ready to go and the bottom was my pajama pants, because I was on, Skype calls or, conference calls. And it's funny, I was so comfortable with the teams I'd work with that I was happy to stand up and say, I truly am doing this. Like, it is not just a joke. I literally do have my pajama bottoms on. So it's great to work in a company that recognises we do have to do and work in different ways. But at the same time, there's an accountability and a discipline that you have as a person about what it means to not be visible physically every day as, would have been in the traditional work styles. I connect frequently when I'm away from my actual office. I do have quiet days where I do block out my time. There might be days where I'll say no meetings for half a day because I really need to strategically focus on this initiative, and the best of me is going to be focused on that. The second part is time management. You really do get hyper-focused on what it means to have a proximity contact versus a remote. And you would understand this, Claire. When you're away from someone, you can do the operational kind of conversations. You're focused. You're really getting through the work that's required, and you're connecting on that work front. And I do, how amazing is it, technology that allows us to feel as if we've known the person all our lives, when actually I've been working with someone now for 2 years who I thought I'd met in person, but we've only ever met over Skype. I've been lucky enough to have, team members come in for development opportunities and go out. And that ability to be an adult and be the master of your day and deliver exceptional results and feel empowered and have purpose comes with allowing people to make decisions. And really, if they don't deliver, it's quite quick that you see it. And so, fairly sure that, a remote working arrangement or, having that level of flexibility may not work for that person.
It's interesting you say that, because I was going to ask you if you believe that anyone can do remote work successfully. And, I think you've sort of partially answered the question in that, we're all grown-ups, and it's about people taking responsibility for what they can deliver remotely, and especially if they're leading a team, it's really down to exactly what you said, really good planning and communication. When you're going to be in the office, people can get that time with you face-to-face and physically, and when you're not, they know that as well. And so no one's left guessing, where's Ange today? And maybe that's the starting point to help others be successful in remote roles as well.
It's a skill that you need to grow and develop. And I think that's where a lot of people who, attempt to work flexibly or, negotiate days to work from home. And to be honest, I had a conversation with someone recently and I said, you don't actually have to say you're working from home. You could be working from anywhere. Just say, if you're not physically in the office, just be comfortable to say you're working remotely. It doesn't matter where it is. And it has a different connotation again, because there's this perception of home being the relaxation location. I think, the mindset needs to shift, and that growth needs to occur where people understand it is actually a skill to develop. And for people to be successful who work remotely, they often have to be hyper aware of over communicating. And for me, everybody gets to work, certainly with the team around me, how they want to work. I have a few of them that actually prefer to come into the office every day. That's their routine. They want to be there at 8 in the morning. They might head off at 4, or they want to get there at 10 o'clock. They might head off at 7, or they might get in at 8, take 2 hours in the middle of the day to go to the gym and recharge, and then head off back home, at 10 o'clock at night. So it's that flexibility of working which best suits you that I support. And I think a big one too, Claire, is that trust factor.
I want to shift directions slightly, because it's not too far from remote working and giving people the environment they need to achieve. I want to ask you about inclusion, because I know your PhD is around sort of the gender gap and around technology and your role as a role model for women in tech. I'm really interested in how you define inclusion.
Yeah, it is long, isn't it? It can be as long as a piece of string. And to be honest, it's culturally specific as well. So for me, I've had a lot of time to think long and hard about this, being so focused on it for a number of years and really looking at crafting my purpose around this particular area. So when I think about what I've needed throughout my career, when I think about the people around me, when I've seen them succeed the most, when I've seen people the happiest to be at work, it's when I've been able to create an environment where they can be themselves, that they're valued for their diversity, whether it's thought, culture, preferences, family lifestyles, whatever it looks like for them. For me, that inclusiveness is just allowing people to be who they are, that there is no need to, shy away from a conversation, to try to pretend you're someone that you're not. And as I said, it doesn't worry me if it's cultural or other. Being inclusive is accepting the people around you for who they are.
What do you think is the role that inclusion plays in building security teams specifically?
Even when I think about the threat vectors that we have, it's not, and I'll just look at myself, white Anglo-Saxon, born in Australia, nuclear family. That's not a hacker. Like, as in, a hacker could be anyone. The security threats are coming from different cultures, different, thought, different. Like, they're just, forget the piece around unethical. That's just a whole other level we could get into. But security teams need to have diversity of thought, background, even just education. I mean, here I came with an education in leadership and stepped into security. It's that whole diverse perspective, which I believe, and it is my opinion, makes for a very successful security team, and a team in general, actually.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that, gender diversity is one part, and then there are so many, as you've said, diversity of background, diversity of industry. There's so much that adds to it that, when we read a resume, we have to make sure we're not just looking for people in our own image, which is probably a podcast for another day, but how do we bring in the different complementary components into a team? And as you said, security is obviously our topic today, but generally every team should be using that as a baseline for how they hire.
No, I agree. And the gender conversation naturally flows, and it's not that we need to focus on it as a specific issue as such. It just becomes a business issue like any other diversity or inclusion issue that we have, and we just need to focus on it like any other. And so whether you need gender diversity in your team, be it security or any kind of diversity, you said about programs of enticing the right person to come into the team. So for me, I do, whilst I am very focused on gender impacts with some of the policies and I guess frameworks that we have in Australia at the moment, I'm very much focused on the broader issue around that diversity and inclusion piece.
And if you could give one piece of advice to other CIOs or heads of technology who are leading security teams within their remit, what would that one piece of advice be?
Being inside a security organisation, being able to understand what their day looks like and the terminology that they use, and not just hand off the issue to somebody else. So that whole obtain a certification, it doesn't have to be as intense as a ISACA certification, but at least almost like a Lean Six Sigma version of security, so that you understand it enough to have the conversation. So, and even just that shows the team around you that you value their profession, and it's that whole walk in someone else's shoes. So the one piece of advice that I would give that has really helped me was obtaining that certification so that I could have the conversations I needed to. And it's just been a brilliant piece of education that has allowed me to excel and succeed in other parts of technology industry.
I think it's great advice because, and I think, again, we could use that in so many areas of our professional lives and personal lives to truly understand what someone else is going through and what their response to things is to have that common language and be able to have those conversations with them, and it coming from a place of being informed as opposed to, as you said, trying to understand just on a day-to-day basis. If you've got that expert knowledge, even at a base level, there's a niche out there for someone to give us a lean cybersecurity for CIOs. And if people want to connect with you further, what's the best way to find you, or the best place to find you? Apart from the Hunter Valley, sorry.
Oh, well, any winery, that's right. No, LinkedIn is the best because that finds me across all of my contact points. So just look me up there, and happy to connect and share other experiences.
And it's been brilliant chatting with you today, and I've loved your experience around remote working, around inclusion, and around your journey from security through to CIO. And I really appreciate your time. I know that you're a very busy woman. So thank you again. That's all we have time for today. Thanks so much for listening. For more information on all our guests, check out the show notes at thesecurecio.com, where you can also find more information on the Secure CIO framework and sign up for my newsletter. If you loved the show, please subscribe to the podcast and feel free to leave me a 5-star rating. I'll see you next week.